After that, everyone talked about how relaxing it was, so we watched a few more movies and then. You thought Clint Eastwood was cool, smart, and impossible to hurt, but you were wrong. The hero finally took off his mask when he was 95 years old, showing a darker side than anyone had ever thought possible. He is listing 6 stars who let him down when he needed them the most. They stood next to him in respect and honor, and then they stabbed him in the back. You'll know why Clint Eastwood never forgot or forgiven them once you hear their names. Leonardo DiCaprio is number 1. Clint Eastwood, the golden boy, never forgot about them. What could make Clint Eastwood leave the set of his movie? The correct answer is Leonardo DiCaprio. Everyone thought it was a dream pairing when J. Edgar began shooting in 2010. The calmest director and the most intense star in Hollywood. But people who were there say it turned into a quiet nightmare. From the very first day, DiCaprio showed up with folders full of notes, pages of historical study, and even FBI memos that he had marked up. Crew members said Clint lost his cool quickly. It is said that Clint once joked that he came in like a detective trying to solve the case of me. I wasn't the case. There was annoyance behind the humor. It was getting bigger. Then there was the scene where she broke down emotionally. In one take, Leo got it right. It was honest, raw, and perfect. It got cold in the room. Clint said, "Perfect, cut." But Leo wanted more than one to himself. Clint stopped being in charge of the camera by the 6th. He was sitting on the work table with his back against it and his face stone-faced. He was asked if he was okay. He only said a few words, "He's still looking for something I already found." When the movie was over, there was a kind of quiet that Clint liked. The next casting calls went the same way. When DiCaprio's name came up, Clint shook his head. He would say, "Great actor, but not my type." They haven't seen each other, shared a stage, or talked since then. After many years, Leo won the Oscar, but Eastwood never called him again. If you want to be perfect, Clint doesn't think about doing it again. The idea is to do it once and never waste time again. Second, Michael Moore, the person who made Clint do too much. When Michael Moore said that Clint Eastwood's American Sniper was like Nazi propaganda, it was like he ended a friendship that was never there. Clint did not yell while he stood there. He stopped him from moving for good. It wasn't their first fight. Since 2005, when Eastwood yelled at Moore at the National Board of Review Awards, things have been getting worse. Moore knows that if he ever comes to my door with a camera, Eastwood will kill him. As a group, they laughed uncomfortably. Clint didn't. He just stood there and stared ahead. It wasn't a game. It was a line in the sand. You need to know what Clint stands for to understand the anger. Order, quiet service, and old-school respect. He thought Moore's films, especially Fahrenheit 9/11, were full of self-promotion and politics dressed up as art. Troops are just pawns in his eyes. A friend of Eastwood's once heard him say, "I see them as heroes." It had to do with respect. Then, almost 10 years later, and wrote online that American Shooter made him think of the Nazi shooter movie Inglourious Bastard. He said it was a joke, but Clint's people said he was furious. One old coworker said that he doesn't forget insults. He gets rid of them. In fact, that's what he did. Moore's name hasn't been in Clint's mind since that tweet. He has worked with both leftists and conservatives, but anyone who makes fun of soldiers gets his attention. Moore didn't just cross it for him, he spit on it. Today, the conversation stops if you bring up Michael Moore in front of Clint. Third, Barbra Streisand, the perfectionist who made the cowboy mad. Clint Eastwood has been in Hollywood for 90 years, but the name Barbra Streisand still makes him clench his teeth. This woman got under his skin so badly that he still won't say her name in interviews. And their fight turned into one of the worst in Hollywood history. It began in the early 1980s, when both were transitioning from acting to directing. Streisand was very good at being in charge. Sometimes it takes 40, 50, or even 60 takes to get just one emotion. Clint did things the other way. No more than 2 takes, then move on. He had said, if it's not real the first time, it's not worth filming. He saw Barbara as the epitome of all that was wrong with the new Hollywood. Control, ego, and thinking too much all the time. By the early 1990s, their artistic ideas had turned into open dislike. In 1992, Streisand wasn't nominated for Best Director for The Prince of Tides. Eastwood was heard saying a friend, maybe if she made decisions faster, her work on more than 3 movies was done after 15 years. It quickly spread through the business world. Then there was The Bridges of Madison County, a project that ended any piece that was still there. After years of deliberation, Streisand dropped out of the running to direct it. Eastwood swooped in, changed the story, and made a quiet, moving masterpiece. So good that Meryl Streep was nominated for an Oscar. And got back at Clint without saying a word. They haven't talked to each other at all since then. Clint saw her as a representation of everything he didn't like about making movies: hesitancy, control, and the loss of gut. Not 50 times, but just once in his code. Tom Lee Jones is number 4. Clint couldn't tame the alpha. He arrived at the set of In the Line of Fire for the first time that day. It is said that Clint Eastwood leaned over to a crew member in 1993 and said, "2 bulls in 1 pen. It's not going to last." He was right. Everyone thought they'd be great together at first, but behind the camera, it was a fight. Jones wasn't the type to follow quiet instructions. He growled and argued. Rewrote their lines and kept acting after the word cut. Clint, who ran his sets with calm, efficiency, and silence, was shocked. One tech remembered that he would stay in character between takes. Clint would just look at her like, "What are you doing?" It got really tense during a scene with a heated argument. Jones was so into character that he towered over Clint and spit out every word with anger. It was cut by the director. Jones kept going, though, and looked Eastwood in the eyes. The group went cold. What did Clint say to his assistant after a long pause? "Life's too short for that kind of theater." After that, he left the set. At that point, the choice was made. Later, casting directors mentioned Jones for Eastwood's future projects, and Clint didn't think twice. "He would tell me that I talk a different language than him. In other words, never again." They've never gotten back together, been on the same panel, or even talked about each other in interviews. Eastwood thinks there can only be one king, and he's the one calling the shots. Richard Burton, the drunk guy who made Clint lose his cool, is number 5. Clint Eastwood doesn't get angry very often, but Richard Burton was very close to annoying him. The stress on the 1968 set of Where Eagles Dare wasn't caused by fame or ego. It was about how hard you work. Burton was always late, spoke slowly, and sometimes smelled like the night before. Clint was already dressed and ready when the sun came up, so he did nothing but stand there and watch him mess up take after take. One member of the team said they could see Clint's respect leaving his face like water. Every night after work, Burton and Elizabeth Taylor went to a bar. His marriage to Taylor was having a rough patch. The crew paid for it every morning. Clint didn't yell or give a speech. He waited, feeling cold, quiet, and more disgusted. Clint is said to have said, "I'm getting paid by the picture, not by the hour," after Burton messed up the same line 10 times. The crew laughed, but not really. However, Burton did not. The message got through. Burton was heard calling the movie a paycheck job, which was the last straw. He thought that was a slap in the face. He thought that every movie, even action movies, should get his full attention. When asked about Burton years later, Clint didn't try to hide the truth. He was talented, but he wasted it. He said nothing else, and he never could have. The movie was a hit, but they broke up on the set. Clint didn't work with or talk about him again after that. Burton's end was set for a man who thinks silence is the best defense. That's not acceptable. 6th, Gene Seberg, the person who made Clint lose his cool. Paint Your Wagon is no longer something Clint Eastwood talks about. And Gene Seberg is the reason why. She was more than just his co-star in the 1969 opera. He swore he would never mix work and pity again because of her. Seberg was weak and hard to predict, and the FBI was already keeping an eye on her because she was politically active. There were tears all over the set. She'd smile one day and make everyone on board feel good. The next day, she'd spend hours alone in her trailer. Clint was the exact opposite. He was focused, on time, and didn't like drama. He was done after the third week. She'd stop in the middle of a scene to ask her why she was doing it, a script editor remembered. Clint would do nothing but look at the floor while she talked. Inside, you could see him dying. The real damage happened afterward. The movie Paint Your Wagon did not do well at the box office, and Seberg told reporters that Clint's wooden act was to blame. He thought that criticizing a coworker in public after he'd worked for months to keep the show together was the worst kind of betrayal. She was done after that. He didn't say her name again. He would change the subject, light a cigar, and leave if someone brought her up. When the sad news of Seberg's death in 1979 came out years later, Clint didn't say a word. Friends say he looked really sad, but he never got better. Some people aren't cut out for the work, he said in a low voice one time. I don't need to deal with it twice. That's the closest he's ever been to forgiving her. What do you think? Clint Eastwood cut them out of his life. Was that the right thing to do, or did his quiet go too far? Join our mailing list to get more Hollywood stories that were never meant to be shared. Let us know what you think in the comments below.